everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In 2002, star high school football player Bryan Banks was falsely accused of rape by one of his classmates. In an effort to avoid a possible life sentence, Banks took a plea deal. The new film, Bryan Banks, tells the story of how, upon release, Banks worked with Justin Brooks of the Innocence Project to exonerate him. Let's take a look.
I was accused of something I didn't do. And the truth matters.
Boyhood dreams got no place in a man's life. You need to concentrate on getting employed. Forget about football.
21, highway medical sign on Broadway.
When I was young, it was hard to see a way out. Football gave me an option.
Bryan Banks with the tackle.
By the time I was 16, I had the attention of the NFL.
The sky is the limit for this kid.
So what happened? Why don't you play anymore?
Bryan Banks was 16 years old when he was accused of a crime he did not commit. He lost 11 years. Scholarship. He was prevented from playing football. The system is broken. We have 10 months to clear his name.
If in that time they do not overturn your conviction, you'll be a prisoner again.
I need something big, something extraordinary.
It's extraordinary that I'm still here. I'm still standing.
Yeah.
You ever been locked up? It nearly killed me.
How did you survive it?
Almost did. But I met a man who showed me a different way. All you can control in life is how you respond to life. I know what I have to do now.
My son is innocent!
They tried to count me out.
You think you'll get another shot at the NFL?
Trust me, we got a plan.
It's not over.
I am innocent, and the truth matters. I know the system doesn't care about me.
But you didn't deserve what happened to you.
Brian's gonna run out of time.
It's not over.
I'll tell you what's extraordinary. I am.
Everybody, please put your hands together from the Innocence Project. Justin Brooks, Greg Kinnear, Sherri, and of course, the man himself, Bryan Banks. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on this film. Bryan, first and foremost, what is it like to watch this movie?
Man, it's tough. You know, being transparent is tough, but it's also exciting. It's a long journey that's finally coming to a positive, somewhat of a positive conclusion. But also, I see myself now in that space of being a representation for the many other people who have experienced this and who are currently experiencing it. So I'm just taking it all in.
Taking it all in. What was the whole process like for you? When did they tell you they were going to start working on a movie about your story?
Yeah, so we've been working on this since 2012.
It takes a while to get a movie.
It takes a while. I was exonerated 2012. A few months later, I'm in different offices having meetings with different production companies and talent agencies. Eventually, I ran into a woman by the name of Amy Bear with Get In Media who just understood the value and the importance of my experience, my family's journey. Her being a mother of 2 teenage boys when we met, she just got it. We started working. She started putting all those amazing pieces together with Shiv Hahn's production and Tom Shadyac as our director. And then this amazing cast started getting put together. And here we are now talking to you.
Justin, the Innocence Project has made or produced stories from the Innocence Project have been made into movies a few times. It seems like that's part of what the Innocence Project does is lending representation to the stories, to the exonerations that they've put forward.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, absolutely, that's part of our mission. I run the California Innocence Project, and getting our messages out through the media is an important part of what we do, because we don't want to just get individuals out of prison like Bryan. We want to change the system. And the only way to change the system is getting people involved in the system and thinking about these issues, and that's what was so important about this movie.
What are some of the issues that you hope people take away from this movie?
The number one issue is that our criminal justice system has become a system of pleas and not a system of trials. And I think people watch a lot of television and movies and think that everyone's getting a trial. And the truth is only 3 to 5% of the criminal cases go to trial. All the rest are negotiated between prosecutors and defense attorneys, and lots of times the truth gets lost in that process. And that's really what's fundamental about this movie. You know, one of the greatest lines in this movie is when Bryan Banks' character, Aldis Hodge, says, "The truth matters." This is about bringing that back, that idea that the truth matters, not expediency. And right now, our system's run due to expediency because it's overloaded with so many cases.
Can I ask, I want to get more into the movie, but how do we change that over the system being overloaded?
We have to start rethinking sentencing. We're one of the only countries in the world that sentences people to prison for the rest of their lives for crimes short of homicide. We need to rethink things like 3 strikes, where we put people away for the rest of their life for drug offenses. We need to free up the resources by having more sensible policies, and we can do that. We're seeing some of that starting to happen as people are, well, as basically states are running out of money. A few years ago, California had to cut $1 billion out of their university system, and it was because we were building so many prisons. So we have to free up the resources. We can do more rehabilitation in prisons, and then we don't have a revolving door.
Do you think that prison reform in a lot of ways has to do with this as well, changing what prison is and what we consider punitive to be something different as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bryan often talks about that if he had committed this offense that he didn't commit, he wasn't given any kind of counseling or anything in prison that was going to turn him away from that. So we have this revolving door because all we do is warehouse people because we're only focused on punishment. And all that does is punish our entire society.
Greg, you play Justin in the movie here.
Much better when my words are written for me, as you can see. I mean, it's hard to follow this real guy.
I set him up. I was hoping that you would just follow along here. What do you got? One of the things that I loved about your performance is that you, for a large portion of the movie, you believe in him, but you also don't believe there's enough that you can do. And so in some ways, you have to be a kind of antagonist to his mission while at the same time presenting a good man who it has to be the sort of story's antagonist. What is that like as an actor?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I thought that was really kind of critical. You know, when I started this process, I went down to the California Western School of Law with Justin and hung out. I was the dumbest kid in his law class for a few days, and got to meet him and tag along with him. And just he brought me into the CIP and just talked to me about. First of all, there's a room you walk by, and it is just filled, just like in the movie. It's also pointed out, filled to the rim with letters of people making requests. When you do this, you know, this organization's exonerated over 30 people who were wrongly convicted and gotten them off. And there's a long line of people who would like to have that kind of assistance. And certainly, you know, Bryan, who's an incredible guy and has an incredible spirit, he comes up and brings this story to you. Who wouldn't be affected by that? So, you know, I was trying to find that juxtaposition as an actor of a guy who wants to help everybody and makes that, you know, a mandate of his life and what he does. But at the same time, here is a story of a guy who's already out of jail. You know, he wants to go play football, and he can't do that because of the ankle bracelet, and he's a registered offender. He can't go to a field, so he's denied the life that he wants to have. But he's out of jail, and it was really interesting to key in on that, having to get over that and to make that turn as an actor in the story. And ultimately, look, I'm just an actor. These are the real guys, which was a great resource for both Aldis and me to have there for all these questions.
Was that a huge thing for you to get over at the time? Because, I mean, meanwhile, I'd imagine a lot of those letters that are piling up on your desk are some people from death row, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Bryan's the first client I've ever had who was out of custody. I'm sure after this movie comes out, there's going to be a lot more writing to me, but it just seems so unfair what had happened to him, and he lost so much. You know, and then personally meeting with him was painful. You know, my clients are mostly locked up, which gives me the benefit of not having to meet with them. And that's a sad thing to say, but they are a pile of letters in boxes. And looking at Bryan's case, it was just so compelling. It was so clear he was innocent. And he said, look, I am sentenced to the rest of my life. You know, this is a life sentence. I'll be a convicted sex offender the rest of my life. I will never get beyond that. It will affect me in getting jobs and where I live and my relationships for the rest of my life. And it was just too compelling not to take it on.
Sherri, you play Bryan's mom, Bryan, who's played by Aldis Hodge in the film, but you play Bryan's mom. Did you get to spend any time with Bryan and his mother at all in the family before getting to set?
I did. I went to Long Beach, and I sat with Leomi, who was Bryan's mom, Leomi Delaney, and Bryan's sister. And Leomi is this very quiet, understated, kind of shy woman. She doesn't speak much. What I noticed about Leomi was there was an air of sadness about her. Even though she would smile, it was just sadness underneath that. And just sitting and talking to her, I said, "Oh my, like you're my hero." And she said, "No, I just did what any mother would do. I just loved my son." But what struck me was the love for her son kept him sane in his darkest days. That love for her son, she wrote him a letter every other week. She wrote him a letter every week. She drove 3.5 hours to the prison and 3.5 hours back home to see her son the entire time he was incarcerated. She sold her car, she mortgaged her home, and this was a school teacher. She was a single mom at the time, a single mother who knew nothing about the court system, knew nothing about, police, and all she knew was she wanted to keep her son off the streets, away from the bad influences. And this thing happened that just overwhelmed her, but she did not allow herself to break down because she had to be strong for her son. And no matter what, she believed her son was always innocent. So I think it was also seeing that pain because she could not keep her son. I can't even say it, but she wasn't able to keep her son from having the experience that he had. And I think that she always carried that with her. Because as a parent, anybody that has a child, that's our first calling, is to protect our children. And the fact that she couldn't protect Bryan, it was all of that just layered over each other. When I was sitting there with her and sitting there with Bryan's sister, of not having their big brother at the house with them. It just affected everybody in the family.
Do you think that's what you put into because in your performance, I mean, we're seeing her in the midst of this ordeal, not after it has been over for a little while. After it's been over, she still has that undercurrent of sadness. You could see how much sadness there had to have been there in the specific moments that it was happening.
Well, even going through the journey with him after he got out of prison, of not being able to find a job, of not being able to, relationships, to having to explain something, that hurts a mother. You don't want to see your son hurting. And I think you could see that in there. She's trying to help him, but it's so heavy. And how do you keep your son up? I mean, that's just what I got from, and Leomi, shout out to Bryan's mom. She's about to get her master's degree really soon. I love Leomi so much. Now it's so wonderful. She's so happy to see all of the love that her son is receiving and all of the love that he is getting, to see her laugh. And when we were at the premiere, just enjoy herself and just kind of sit in and bask in all of that love. It just was really a sight to see.
Bryan, what do you think of Aldis Hodge's performance?
Wow. Where do I begin? You know what? One thing what really stuck with me was the fact that when I first met him and we came into contact with each other, he said, "Look, B, I want you to know now, I'm not trying to act this role. I want to become you. I want to experience what you experience." And he put his money where his mouth was. I wore a GPS tracking device on my ankle after I got out of prison for 5 years. It didn't come off for 24/7. And he wanted to...
You had that on for 5 years?
Yeah, for 5 years. And he wanted to know what that felt like. And so right when we got on set, him and Tom took that same, Justin kept it, after I cut it off my leg, and they put it on his leg, and he wore it the entire time that he was on set. And I remember one time we went to we shot the film in Memphis. We went to a Grizzlies game. We sitting courtside, and here he is courtside. He's got this thing on his ankle, and I'm sitting there, and there's a part of me that feels sorry for him. Even though I know he was doing it for a role, I'm sitting there, and I'm feeling for him. And I'm thinking, like, man, somebody probably could see it. What if somebody does see it? What is he going to say?
Well, that's probably what he wanted, was to experience the feeling of what having that thing on and having people look at him and notice it.
But that's how much he wanted to make, that's how much he wanted this to be as authentic as he could make it. And I respected that so much about him. So as far as I'm concerned, he went above and beyond to capture the essence of this story. He accomplished it, succeeded. And I don't know much about awards, but this man deserves an Oscar or something above, because he told a true story in its authentic form, and people are touched by the way he performed and did that.
You know, there's a scene in the movie, and it's also a moment from your life where your accuser Facebooks you after you've been out of prison for how long had you been out by the time that
I had been out for 9 years.
You'd been out for 9 years?
Well, I had been out for 4 years. I had done 5 years and 2 months.
That's what I thought, yeah.
And then 5 years of parole. So 4 years into the 5 years of parole, I'm sitting at home. I'm looking for a job. I'm bored, so I get on Facebook. I click the box of friend requests, and there it was, friend requests.
What was that like? What was that moment like? The movie captures it well, but I also feel like it could never actually capture the feeling a human being would have in that moment.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the film, but I will say...
You're sitting here, it's spoiled.
Yeah,
you
I'm
don't
here.
have an ankle
I'm alive. But it was... I didn't believe that it was her. I thought somebody was playing some sick joke with some fake account that just wanted to pull at me. And I remember just having this out-of-body experience where I was just... When I saw the request, it just put me into a shock. Everything that I had gone through those past 9 years started to resurface, and I like had this like relapse almost of just this can't be her at this moment after everything that I've been through, trying to be my friend now. And so I had to dig further into finding out if it was her, and you'll see it in the film.
Greg, you have such a long roster of movies that you've been in. You just directed a movie. I think you're for the first time this past year, right? Congratulations. It's no small feat. At this point, I imagine you have some choice over how you pick movies. How do you pick the movies that you're in? And shows you're in shows.
I don't know. I guess, same old boring story, It starts with a script and, but I do think it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. There are all sorts of, different reasons, a chance to work with a certain director or an actor, and, certainly script is important. I will say with regard to Bryan Banks in this movie is that sometimes, art meets up with advocacy in a really seamless way. If this wasn't a true story, I would still think this is just a hell of a movie. Even if these guys weren't real and didn't do the things that they've done and experienced what they experienced, I just thought that's a great movie. First and foremost, the fact that you can watch this film and be inspired and kind of feel I think a pull of awareness towards things that you might have kind of just let drone on in the background. These people who are being falsely accused and stuff. It becomes old hat. You read about it, you hear about it so much, and it's kind of a wake-up in that sense. So, once in a while a film gets to fit both, and I think this is a good example of that. But, I don't know. It's always a search. You got a script for me?
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk backstage.
Okay.
I got a couple
I'm
of things.
open.
I got a couple things I'm cooking up. Justin, I'm curious. There's a lot. We're in the midst of the Me Too movement. It's a lot of talk about it, rightfully so. How do you feel about putting a movie like this out right now, which I don't think it goes against anything within the Me Too movement, but I think as a headline, someone could potentially posit it that way.
I think it's critical to have it out now because we have too many extreme positions going on in this country right now. It's all either guns are bad, guns are good. There's no middle ground. And I think when we start saying no women lie, all women lie, it's very dangerous. So what this movie is about is the overwhelming majority of rape allegations are correct. And in fact, there's a lot more women raped who don't report it. It's the most unreported crime. But that doesn't mean we can go to the point of ignoring the few where there are false allegations. We have a responsibility to that. So it's very dangerous when we take these polar positions because the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And that's why this is an important part of that conversation, to remember it. Not to come in and say, well, this is a movie to represent that women lie. That's not what it's about. This movie is about one particular case involving a 15-year-old girl in the case, but really, more importantly, involving a system that allowed that to happen. You know, she's not the bad person in all this. The whole system is under indictment because that system ground up a 17-year-old kid.
You know, that's one of the things that that comes across in the movie is that she doesn't really come across as a villain. Was that important for you, even though she is in many ways one of the main causes for why you spent time behind bars and why you're on parole for 5 years? Was it important for you that she didn't come across as the sort of main antagonist and villain in this story?
It was important for me that that she was not vilified, because I didn't want that to be a representation in the minds of men of how they saw women in general. This is the actions of one person, not the actions of women. And so it was important for me that the truth was told, but not in a way where people left the theater and they decided, now I want to judge everyone based off of what this one person did. She's obvious, and she's also, at the time, was 15, I was 16. So yeah, her actions were horrendous and the effects were unimaginable. But she's also a 15-year-old girl who was raised by somebody who put her in the mindset of thinking that it was okay to make those types of lies. So it's one thing to say, how could a person do something like that? And it's another thing to say, why? And when you start to ask the question why and you peel back the layers, it goes beyond her. Right. It goes to her mother or whoever raised her, and so forth and so forth.
You know, I have to give a shout out to Zosha Rockamore,
yes,
who played the accuser, and she gave her a lot of humanity. You got to see the layers that Bryan was talking about being peeled back of a very broken young woman. And even Leomi, I remember asking Leomi, because I said, I would be so angry at this person who accused my son and took away his life, and weren't you so mad at her? And she just gently said, I'm not. I felt sorry for her. She said, I felt angry because she had been manipulated by people around her who was supposed to have been protecting her. So even his mother couldn't be angry with the woman who accused him. And I think, like, piggybacking off what Justin said, it really, the movie just, it shone a spotlight on the failure of the judicial system. Had they done their due diligence, this might have been a cut and dried case, and he could have gone home and went back to school if they had just done an investigation. But they failed him, from the police officer to the judge to the DA to the parole officer. Everybody failed a 16-year-old child.
I think we have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has it right here? Hi.
Hey, so my question's for Sherri. Yes. You inspire me more ways than one, and I was just wondering, what advice can you give someone who is freelancing in media that hasn't quite got their big break, who's a woman and also a person of color?
Freelancing in the media, continue being curious about people and their stories, and really go for that and ask those questions. Do your homework, please. Do your research. I think when I talk to people and I go, did you even read it? Did you even watch it? Did you even spell my name right? You know, I think continue being curious and continue and putting it out there, and somebody will take notice. I guarantee that.
And if you admired Sherri before, when you see her in this movie, I'm telling you, she is unbelievable. It is a terrific performance.
Thank you, Greg.
So, just had to add that.
Academy Awards all around.
What advice would you give, Greg?
Better than the Academy Awards.
He wants better than. Yeah. I'd be perfectly happy if Greg got an Academy Award. He doesn't.
Me too. I would too.
I've been waiting. Yeah. It's been a while.
All of you guys.
He's this close.
One more. Is the microphone in the question? Oh, right here. Hi.
Hi. This question is for Sherri. Yes. Sherri, you're a mom of a son.
Yes.
A black boy.
Yes.
How did you feel playing this role? And you talked a little bit about the emotions when you met his mom, but really digging into the character.
Well, when I read the script, my son was 12 at the time, and I said, Jeffrey could be Bryan Banks. And now my son is 14. He could really be Bryan Banks. And so Bryan would talk to me about how he felt about that scene and about, you know, what he was going through. Then I had Jeffrey on my mind. Aldis had his mother on the set. They're attached at the hip. There was a lot of mother stuff going on. He actually would not watch Aldis and I film our scenes because it was too painful for him, that emotion. But yeah, as a mother, that's what I go through every day. Thank God for people like Justin and the California Innocence Project who are trying to change that. But I hope that this film will show mothers that we're pretty powerful and we can use our voices, because I don't care if you go to any court hearing, you'll see a person there and his mother sitting right behind him going, he didn't do it. And the man will go, Mom, I said I did it. And the mother will be like, no, we didn't. We are very powerful. And I hope that this movie shows us that we can change the system with our voices.
Guys, it's a beautiful film. Congratulations, Bryan. Congratulations on the film. It's called Bryan Banks. It comes out tonight and tomorrow. Go see it in the theaters and give them a huge round of applause for being here.